Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Building in Minecraft. I am the Berserking Corgi. This time, I am answering a cry for help. In one of his recent episodes, Rodorenn created, this build and asked builders to help him redo it, improve it, and explain the process that they went through in order to do that. And I'm willing to take that challenge because I'm sure that there are plenty of people who would like to know how I decide the things that I build. So let's go ahead and get started on just looking around the build really quickly. All right, this is Rodorenn's log cabin, and I will link the original video down in the description box below. Overall, I would say this is pretty average Minecraft build. So this is a really good place to start from, I think, to show improvements that can be made to this to make it look a little bit more realistic or maybe beautiful. Now over here, we have the basic blocks that were used to create this build. We have oak planks, stripped oak fence, and a oak door. The spruce planks, spruce logs, cobblestone, and clear glass. That's pretty much for the most part, minus, of course, some spruce stairs. That's what was used in this build. Now over here, I have the color palette that I recommend. All of it is very similar in color and block style as to the original, with the few exceptions. I have included mossy versions of cobble and put in stairs and walls. I am changing the glass out for white stained glass. This is a personal preference. I just enjoy the way it looks more than the the clear glass. I'm also going to be adding dark oak. Why dark oak? Because it matches really, really well with the spruce logs. And it's really going to enhance that block without making it too similar to the original spruce. I'm going to be adding spruce trapdoors, have the spruce logs still, the spruce planks. I'm going to be putting in just a small amount of the strip spruce, and I'm going to be doing spruce doors. The oak is going to stay pretty much similar, but I am going to be adding in the trap doors. Now, what is in this chest here? Well, this chest has other blocks that I might be using to decorate the build. All right, guys, let's go ahead and head over and start looking at the build itself. Now, I have a few questions that I ask myself when I'm working on a build. Number one, is the layout not only going to suit the purpose of the build, but is it interesting? Is the shape of the build interesting? Now, in this case, the build is 10 by 10 blocks with a front porch that's 5 by 10. This is very square and honestly not very interesting. So that is a big no for the answer to that question on this build. Number two, are the materials complementary of each other? In this case, I would say that they are, but I feel like they weren't utilized properly. These planks are very, very busy, and they are the majority of the build. So I feel like they're very, very distracting. And this leads me into the next question. Does it add anything to the build? I believe that because these planks are distracting, they do not add anything to the build. If I put an addition on it, does that add importance or something visually interesting to the build? So that's probably one of the biggest questions that I ask myself when I'm creating something. Does what I'm doing actually add to the build? Number four, is when I'm doing something that's going to need to be highlighted in the build. Usually that's going to be an entranceway, maybe an interesting roof line, a big window, a porch. Is what I'm doing need to be highlighted? If so, how can I achieve that? And my answer to that is usually, like, how do you highlight something in real life? You circle it. So that's normally what I do, and I'll show you what I mean by that later. Finally, the last question, does the build need accenting? Accenting can be planters, plants, trees, all of those kind of things. I find that even though they aren't necessary for a build, they add volumes to the build. And yes, this build could definitely use some accents. So let's go ahead and get started on the first thing to improve this build, and that is going to be this roof. I am sorry, Rodorenn, this roof is not working for me in any way. It's not visually interesting because it's the same block as everything else. It doesn't add anything to the build other than the fact that it adds a roof to it in the most minimal way. And to be honest, this big block of oak planks to the front just adds too much bulk. And it makes the top of the build really heavy and dense. So I'm going to go ahead and just destroy all of this real fast, and I will be right back. All right, now that I have got the roof removed, now I want to deal with this very square shape that this build has, because honestly, this layout is very, basic, and I want to make it more visually interesting. And how do you do that? Well, you add a little bit more shape to it. I'm going to come out 3 blocks from under each of these windows, and then I'm just going to fill in between them and add a second layer so it's equal to the foundation on the existing house. I'm going to go ahead and go over to the other side and do the exact same thing over here. This a little bit, just teeny tiny of space added is going to visually add so much to this build. Look how much more interesting this shape is going to be than the square that it currently is. The next thing that I want to do is change out these planks. I said that they were visually distracting, and it doesn't really have that log cabin look. Now, what does have that log cabin look to me are these stripped oak logs. I think that they look great. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out these walls all the way around and start filling in with the stripped oak. I'm going to go ahead and break these windows out too, because they're going to be behind a wall now, and it's really not going to serve a purpose where they're currently placed. We'll move them to a new place later. And we'll also want to go ahead and just remove the spruce that's on the side here, because it's going to be behind the wall as well, so we don't need it there anymore. All right, now that we have all of those walls torn down, now we want to start laying down the stripped oak logs. Now, one thing that makes log cabins interesting is that the angle of the logs alternates, kind of like, I don't know, like Lincoln logs, if you know what those are. If not, I will show you what I mean. On this edge, you can see that there's the raw edge of the oak showing. I'm going to go ahead and angle these ones the opposite way and not have the edge showing on this side. When I go up to the next layer, let me just throw down a couple of filler blocks here. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and go all the way out to the edge so this raw edge is showing, and the one on the alternate side is not. And I'm just going to have them alternate like that. You see what I kind of mean there? And I'm just going to continue to do this until there are 5 levels of these stripped oak logs. All right, guys, now as you can see, I got that all done, and that looks so much more log cabin-y than the planks did. And unfortunately, all this spruce in the front is starting to look a little bit too heavy. It's too dark, and it's not complementing the stripped oak quite as well. So I just want to go ahead and remove these pillars right here. And I'm going to replace them with that stripped oak. So it's going to be 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 4 up, just like so. And the same on this side as well. I'm going to just go ahead and connect them across the center like that. Now, unfortunately, this makes these doors not very interesting. They're too samey, and they're complementing, I guess, too much. So I want to go ahead and remove those. And I'm going to ask myself, is the front door going to be like an accent? Is it something that I want to highlight? Well, the answer is yes. So that means what? I want to circle it. So I'm going to replace this cobble with some of these stripped oak logs. And then I'm going to leave the 2 gap for the door, and then do the oak across just like so. Now, instead of oak for the front door, I'm going to go ahead and put in spruce. So I'm going to go in from the inside to place the doors in, just so that there is a lip on the outside. I think that's far more visually interesting, and Rodorenn had already done that, which was really, really nice, so he at least understood that. All right, guys, now you can see that that has really done a lot to change the front of the house. It's a lot lighter. But now we need to finish circling that front door because it is a very important part of the build. So I'm going to take these stripped spruce logs and stack them up 3 high on either side. Then I'm going to take these dark oak stairs and start to create a roof over the top of it. And in the middle here, upside down stair on the back of each one of those stairs. And then I'm going to finish it off by peaking the roof in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and come out 1 more layer on either side, just like so. But in the middle, instead of putting an upside down stair here, I'm just going to go ahead and throw in a slab and then stick the upside down stairs on either side of the bottom. Now that's already looking a lot more interesting. It draws your eye into the front door. And now I always like to add just a touch more detail. So I'm going to throw in some spruce fences. I really feel like that latticing effect that it creates makes that area pop without being too bulky or heavy. All right, for what I would like to do next, now that we have changed the build out for this stripped oak, this porch is starting to look a lot like the main build. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of this stripped oak up to where the door is. I want to leave that in. And I'm even going to remove it underneath these pillars as well. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and fill it in with spruce slabs. Why spruce slabs? Well, because full blocks are a little big and dense for a porch. Porches are notoriously thinner than 1 meter. So I feel like the slabs do a better job of representing that. Why spruce? It is not something, the spruce planks are not something that is predominant in the build, but complements the colors of the build very well. All right. There we go. Now, if you want to add in a touch more detail to the porch, this isn't necessary, but this will add an extra dimension of depth to it. Knock out these ones, these slabs, and add in stairs. It almost makes it look like there's support on the pillars now instead of just kind of hanging there. I feel it adds a lot more structure to the build and grounds it a lot more. But like I said, this is a personal preference of my own. There we go. Now that we have that done, the main support structure for the porch is actually these spruce logs. Now, though they do complement the build's color, I don't feel like they complement it as best as something else would. Now, the majority of the build that touches the ground is already cobblestone. So why not exchange these out for cobblestone as well? And to add a little bit more character to it, I think I'm going to add in the mossy cobblestone as well. So in places such as maybe right here, I'll go ahead and add in a mossy cobblestone and then, a couple regular cobblestone and then maybe a stone wall. I'm going to do the same thing over here. We'll add in cobble, maybe a couple mossy cobble over here, and then another stone brick wall. Then go ahead and do something pretty similar here. We'll go ahead, put in some cobble. And then instead of putting a stone brick wall here, it's going to be more like a hand railing. So let's go ahead and just put in a slab on top. And if you're wondering how I'm placing whether cobble or mossy cobble, I'm just picking randomly. That's all it is. And there you go. That looks pretty good. Now, these railings, they work, but, they aren't creating like a grand staircase. It's only there because, whoops, what else am I going to put there? Kind of a thing. So what I want to do is create something a little bit more interesting that creates a little bit of a grander staircase. So what I'm thinking is putting a couple upside down stairs like this. Placing maybe this is just a filler block, then an upside down stair facing that way. Now that creates something that's visually interesting, but still kind of follows the angle of a stair rail down. Let's go ahead and do the same thing over here. We'll put in a filler block and then put in a stair. Now I'm going to take the dark oak fence because I think that the dark oak stands out a lot better than the oak fence does. And I'm just going to go ahead, and replace it all the way around the entire porch because a porch is an accent and it needs to be circled. If I had a great porch like this on the front of my house, I definitely would want everybody to notice it. Now, just to go ahead and quickly finish off the stairs with the end of the railing, I'm just going to throw down a couple of the stripped spruce and just top it off with a slab like so. And I already think that that looks like a much more grand stairway that is inviting you to come onto this magnificent porch. All right, guys, now that we've finished that, we're going to go ahead and move on because like a lot of log cabins, this is going to have some huge windows in front, and I'm going to kind of want to do all the windows at once. So let's move on to the side and start framing out the area for the window here, which as always, you want to circle the things that are going to be highlighted in the build. So I'm going to knock out these 2 rows, and just like on the corners of the build, I'm going to throw in some spruce logs. I'm also going to want to start setting up the peak of the roof because I want to have a peak in the front and also have these sides peak as well. So since the roof is going to start probably here, then stair step up here, let's go ahead and add 1 to each of those spruce logs. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and break out everything here and leave that open for the window in the future. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the back. Knock out these 2 rows and fill it in. If you're wondering why I'm leaving the windows till last, I find that because I changed the windows so much, including the detail around them, it's just easier to wait till the end and see how the windows fit into the build instead of making the build fit around the windows or changing the windows all the time. But if it's easier for you to just do all the windows at the same time you're doing the wall, I highly recommend just doing that. All right, guys, let's go ahead and move on to the back. Now, I want another beautiful, ginormous window, so obviously all of this is in the way. Why windows? Why do I have so many windows? Windows are a great accent piece that adds a whole bunch of detail, makes it feel more like a home in real life without adding unnecessary amounts of detail. So I'm thinking that maybe 1 in from here, so like this. Guess you want to know what? After I'm done building these up, we need to go ahead and start setting up the frame of the roof because I know that these columns in the corners are definitely going to be too tall because I would like to start the roof on this line right here. So that means I think I'm going to break it out to right there. Same thing over here and in these front corners too. Now, I want to go ahead and circle the window because it's accent. I think the best way to do that would actually be to knock out these bottom ones and have it connect all the way across with the pattern going horizontally. Let's step back and look at it. Yeah, I think that flows a lot better. I don't want to have it go through because it's going to show this end, which I don't think is great. So I think like that is probably the best. Now I'm going to go and head and fill in the sides with the stripped oak. all the way up, making sure to leave that angle for the roof that we're going to have. Yep, that looks pretty good. Now time for the actual window. I like to have my windows 3 high generally. So let's go ahead and do that. I just like them 3 high because it's larger than the player, so it feels like it's grand and in scale when it's like that, like a big plate glass window. So for the cap of the window, I often like to use stairs. I even like to use them on the bottom for the window sills, but like I said, I like the way that this actually circles it. So I want to keep a little bit of this darkness going with these spruce stairs, but I also want to tie it in to the sides. So I think I'm going to throw in some of the stripped oak as well. And I kind of am in love with that. That looks good. I'm thinking maybe an additional window for this space up here that, fits into the peak of the roof. So once again, let's go ahead and circle it by adding in some logs. And it's not going to be able to be very big, so let's go ahead and fill it in 4 across. And then maybe those 2. That looks good. And I guess to finish out the peak of the roof, let's go ahead and just throw in some more of this stripped oak. Let's place a filler there and put 2 across like that. And that finishes out the peak of the roof really, really nicely. Now, I want to go ahead and add in the final thing, some accents to this, so it stands out just a little bit more. And one of my favorite accents to throw in on a window, of course, is a sill. So let's put one up on this top area like that. Now, that doesn't look too bad, but it feels like it's missing some support right here. So let's put some filler blocks in for the meantime and just add a couple of spruce gates and open them up. Because when you open the spruce gates up, they touch the block next to them. Unlike when they're closed, they kind of just hang there. And I mean, they look fine like that, but I really like the support that it adds when they are open. So I think that right there fills in the window really, really nicely. All right, guys, now that I've got that done, these blocks right here are blending in too much with the windowsill. So I'm thinking maybe I might change them out for dark oak because it'll match the spruce a little bit better. And I like that. It adds enough contrast to these stairs. It matches these ones, but I don't lose that detail that the stairs give. So yes, I think that is an improvement. And I'm also thinking that down here I might place in a raised planter box because, this is a big empty space and it needs to be highlighted. So let's go ahead and put in like a foundation here under each of the corners, a couple of stairs, perhaps. And let's go ahead and add in some, I don't know what, let's point the edges in, maybe see how that looks. I think I like it better with them square on like that because it matches up with the cobblestone a bit better. And let's throw in some grass blocks on top of that. Then some spruce gates to kind of cover up the sides of those blocks. Or some spruce trapdoors to cover in the sides of these blocks. Now that doesn't look too bad, but it definitely needs some more details. So I like to add in fences underneath it. Like I said, with the front door, that lattice look adds a lot, I think, to the structure of something without adding too much bulk. And I think that's looking really good. We'll add in the plants later at the end with the final accents. Now let's move on to the windows on the sides. Now, like I said, I like to put stairs on the bottom sometimes of the windows, and I think that this might be an appropriate place to do it. And I'm thinking maybe a square window over here. You want to know what? I can even do 2 square windows. That might like look really nice. So let's go ahead, throw in some stripped oak and another square window right here. Then perhaps just like with the back is over here, let's add in a windowsill right here. And that looks good. I like that. I really do like that. But once again, let's go ahead and finish out the peak of the roof here. So let's put a filler block in. We'll just throw some of the stripped oak across the top. And perhaps, so let's put in some shutters to break this up just a little bit more. Yeah. Now, I don't want to put shutters on the top because when I put the roof in, it's actually going to cover up part of this. So that's why I'm not going to do any on the top in case you're wondering why it's only on the bottom. Now, I'm going to go over to this other side and do the exact same thing over here. Yep, that looks good. And finally, finish out the peak of the roof with the stripped oak. Yes, yes, yes. This is looking great. Now, let's go ahead and finish framing out the window in the front. This one's going to be a little difficult. And I might have to adjust this window that I created in the middle because I didn't actually count where it was compared to where the peak is going to be now. It is actually the height that the peak originally was. So that will adjust on the fly. I'm thinking let's just go ahead and add the stripped oak here since the window I am circling in the stripped oak. I want to continue that circle down here as the accent. Now, if we go ahead and start throwing in windows, this will actually help us decide what the peak of the roof is going to be. So there's going to be a stair there. There's going to be a stair there. Add another window. There'll be a stair here. So all I have to do is just knock that out. That's not bad. Let's go down here and do the same thing. Fill in the window following the stair step of what the peak of the roof will be. And there we go. Finally, I'm going to fill in the middle window. Now you can see it's going to have this really cool A-frame kind of window in the front that is really, really common in log houses. All right, guys, now that we have the windows in place, the peak of the roof's built, and the walls on the exterior pretty much done, let's go ahead and start the roof of the project. I'm going to use spruce stairs because the color is complementary to the colors that we already have in place. But it's not the same. Like if I was to use oak, it would be too similar to the oak here. And it isn't exactly the same as the logs. It's got a nice contrast, but obviously it's in the same complementary colors. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in this whole roof really, really quickly just to the edge of the build. But then, because the roof is an accent, we need to do what? We're going to need to circle it. So when we are done, we'll go ahead and start circling the project. All right, and there we go. The roof is all finished. Oops, I made a little mess up here. I don't want these stairs right here. I want to have it level with the edge of the build. But as you guys can see, having the peaks on both of the cardinal directions of the build has made it have 2 different layers, which obviously adds a lot more visual interest than just a singular peaked roof on a square build. But because the roof is obviously a highlight, we want to circle it, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and add an eave to this roof with the dark oak stairs. I'm just going to follow the line of the roof all the way around. And then when I get here, I'm just going to want to place this on the side of the build. That's why I didn't want those spruce stairs there. And let me just go ahead and finish this all the way around this whole build. And then we'll finish with the final roof detail when we are done with that. All right, guys, and done. You can see how doing that has already added a lot to the roof of this. It isn't all just the same block. It isn't blah or boring. We've circled it and made it interesting. So now we want to, fill this in. This looks really like pencil thin. So let's add some upside down stairs to the underside of this eave, if I can get it right. We're going to do this, and I'll show you why I do this. You want to know what? Let's do one side and then the other so you can see why. Look how pencil thin and tiny that looks. It isn't, extraordinary in any way. But when we add the upside down stairs on the other side, you can see how it really makes the roof line stand out, how it looks so much more interesting. So let's go ahead and do this on the peak of all 4 sides of this roof. And now you can see why I didn't put in the shutters up here, because it would have been cut off by this stair. Just like so. It ends up being kind of circled almost by the roof instead of by the shutters. And finally, fill in the last side. There we go. This is pretty much the bulk of the body of the build done on the exterior. And the only thing that we need to do is probably add in some final details. Now, one thing that I really want to do is that this cobblestone foundation is, it's there, but it isn't interesting. It is lacking dimension. So what I'm thinking about doing is kind of making it look a little bit more worn by knocking out some blocks and throwing in some mossy cobble here and there. Some stairs here and there. I think that this will add a whole new layer to the foundation that it didn't have before and make it a lot more interesting to look at. I mean, you can already see the difference between how this is more visually interesting than just the plain cobble. I'm just kind of randomly throwing it in here and there if you're wondering how I'm doing it. I don't want to take away too much from the corners because it might minimize the build too much. You want to know what? Let me switch those around. All right, guys, I love it. Just changing out a few blocks like that has added a lot of dimension to the build. And even if you don't like the stairs, just adding in a little bit of mossy cobble here and there makes the cobblestone more interesting. Not the same and too uniform all the way around, because in real life, things aren't uniform. Things are different. Things vary. So I think that is pretty much it for the outside, other than final details that we can do at the end. I do want to, on the other hand, make some changes on the interior of this build. One main one in particular. If you walk in and look up, there is this gigantic ceiling, but when you walk over to the sides, you can see that obviously there is space up here. Why aren't we utilizing this loft space? So I'm going to go ahead and break out all these full blocks. This is too much up here. Nope. Let's take all of this out. Besides, it's also cutting off this wonderful window that we have in the front here. I don't want to do that. We want to be able to admire this amazing view that we've put in. Okay, you want to know what? While we're in here, we will go ahead and fill in this floor down here as well. I like the use of the spruce planks on the floor, so I'm just going to continue that all the way across into these little alcoves that we created. I'm also thinking up here in this loft area of doing the spruce as well. So let's go ahead and put in a floor right here, right where the blocks used to be. But I prefer the use of the half slabs because when you're looking in from outside, they aren't going to seem so heavy as full blocks. And let's just go ahead and fill it in up to here, I think. And then maybe start to like curve it in a little bit towards the middle. Because I still want to have a lot of space up here, maybe for like a bedroom or something. But I don't want it to, take away from being able to look down on the area below from the loft. And we'll just fill this in across here. You want to know what? Maybe just like that. Because I'm thinking we might put a stairway in over on this alcove and leave this alcove as kind of a viewing area to look down, maybe. All right, you can already see how less bulky that those slabs look than the full blocks. Why slabs? Because remember, a full block is a meter. That's 3 feet. You wouldn't want a 3-foot wide balcony floor. Absolutely not. You would want it to be sleek. So instead of putting up traditional fencing up here, I'm thinking about putting in oak trap doors. Now, this can be a little bit tricky, so I think I'm going to start in the middle. The reason why it gets a little bit tricky is because you have to place some on the outside and some on top of the block. So you can place these ones on top of the block and you can place that one on top of the block. But now how are you going to place one here? Now how I simplify that is just adding an outline of blocks, just filler blocks all the way around. That way I have something else to place the gates on. So I'm going to stick that one there. And then I'm going to stick one right there. And then when I come over here, I'm place one on top. And then one on the, I'm going to have to go out one more on this. Because I can't jump because I'm headbanging here. And there we go. Now we can just break out these blocks. All right, there you go, guys. All done. Now we have this little railing so that we won't fall off anymore. And it's not too heavy like the spruce trapdoor would be because you can see through it. And I think this is really my favorite use of the oak trap doors. Now this space would be an amazing bedroom, and you want to know what? Let's go ahead and grab a bed and throw it in here right now. We'll go ahead and do a double bed right there. All right, guys, I think that's pretty much for the interior done. I know I'm not the greatest interior decorator, but I don't think that the inside of this looks too bad. It's utilitarian, and I think aesthetically it doesn't look horrible. This is pretty nice, I think, still, though, but I want to go ahead and finish out with doing the accents. My final question that I like to ask myself is, are there accents that I can use to make things more visually interesting? And here, obviously, the answer is yes. I need to add more light because that is going to accent it at night. Plus, these little lanterns are amazing to look at, and I love them. So I think putting them all over the porch looks fantastic. I also think that I want to add some flowers to these window sills. And then maybe back here in the planter, we'll go ahead and maybe throw in a fern. Maybe a couple of other flowers. I really like the orchids, but you don't have to use the orchids. I just love them. And that's a simple little planter. Maybe up here in the window, we can throw in, maybe over here. I'll throw in a little fern. That looks pretty nice. And maybe over here, we'll put in an orange tulip. That frames out the windows really, really nicely. It makes the house look a little bit more lived in. Now, for the last thing, I think I want to add in a little bit of landscaping. So maybe, like a couple of bushes would look nice. Just around here and there, maybe a little hedge up here at the front. That's a little bit better maintained. Maybe a little accent area over here like that. And I'm also probably going to start throwing in some ferns. I really like the way that these tall ferns look with something a little bit more rustic, like a log house. And if you're wondering how I create the little plants that I make, just trial and error. Half the time they look horrible. I'm gonna be honest, half the time they look horrible. So, yeah, I just kind of build them, and if they don't look good, then I tear them down and I rebuild them. All right, guys. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up this build. I hope that you agree with me that I think this is a big improvement over the log cabin that we started with. And guys, just keep in mind that you can make these improvements to your build too. Just keep the 5 big questions in mind. Number 1, is the layout going to meet my needs? Slash, is it visually interesting? We added a lot of visual interest by adding these wings onto the side of the build, plus placing in this huge, ginormous window. Number 2, are the building materials that I'm using going to mix well together? Are they complementary? Well, we used a whole bunch of really warm wood, so yes, they were very complementary. And then we tied in the cobblestone all the way through the build. So I think that that made it complementary as well. Plus, we made it far more visually interesting by adding in some mossy cobble. Also, is what I'm adding to the build going to improve the build in any way, or is it going to get in the way? Is it going to be visually interesting? Is it going to add a utilitarian purpose to the build? Because nothing is worse than an overwhelmingly cluttered build. Am I going to need to highlight an area that's going to be accented, such as the front door, such as the windows on the side of the build or in the back of the build? We went through and accented them so that they draw the eye to them. And I think that that's very important. Even something as simple as shutters, a flower on a windowsill, that draws the eyes to an area that you want to be highlighted. And finally, and probably one of my favorite, adding accents to the build. They're not necessary to the structure, but they add a whole bunch to the visual interest of the build. In this case, we added in some plants to take care of that. And it helps break up the build so that it looks a little bit more lived in and a little less sterile. And I think we'll stand here on this front porch today and we will sign out. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like. If you haven't already, do consider subscribing. If you don't follow me over on Twitter, why not? I release sneak peeks, teasers, and occasionally pictures of my puppy dog, BC. If you want to check out the original video for the build of the log cabin, don't forget, I'm linking it down in the description box below. Also, go check out Rodoren's channel. He has some pretty good content over there, and he's one of my fellow members on the Adults Play Minecraft server. I am the Berserking Corgi. Have a fantastic day.